human being, we are all translators. Translator in the sense that, look, what I say now and what you receive and what you comprehend, what you access and what you understand are not exactly the same thing. They are different. That means, as an individual or as a listener, you have the capability to translate my ideas, my concepts, my deliberations, my statements, or my arguments in your own way so that you can comprehend those ideas in a far better way than you can do with what I say from here or from my perspective. So every individual is basically a translator in his or her own capacity, own turn. Now, when we say that all are good translators, then what is translation? Here, we are talking on an academic front, on academic level. Technically, when we talk about translation, we usually understand that we are trying to translate or convert or render the information, the ideas, the concepts which are produced in a particular language, say language A, into another language, say language B. So technically, whenever we say that translation, we are actually trying to give an idea which has been taken from Oxford Companion to the English language. That translation is the communications of meaning of a source language text by means of an equivalent target language text. So if you look at the definition given here, you can very clearly understand that there is a piece of text produced in English or in a source language, and that is being rendered in the target language. And there are two important questions involved into it, that the idea, the information which is embedded into the source text should be properly rendered into the target text. There would be no loss of information in translation. At the same time, there will be no addition of information in the target language text. So translation is a very tricky business, a very challenging task. And that is why it has been one of the major areas of research and studies for centuries. Now, because of the introduction of computer science, we have come across a new term called machine translation. What has been done for generations manually by some human experts who are engaged in translation tasks, now the translation is being carried out or being done by a machine. Now the issue has come up in a different way. Whether a machine can translate things properly as a human being does, or whether a machine is a better translator than a human being, or what are the conditions, what are the factors, what are the linguistic and extra-linguistic issues become responsible in the entire scheme of translation done by both man and machine. So I would, in my talk here, try to classify things in a very methodical way as far as I have been able to understand things with regard to translation, and try to focus the linguistic, particularly the lexical issues which are related to it. In Globalization and Localization Association has a definition of translation. It says, translation is the communication of meaning from one language, that is source language, to another language, that is target language. The purpose of translation is to convey the original tone and intent of a message, taking into account the cultural and regional differences between the source and target language. If you go through this definition, you can find out that there are many issues are actually raised in the case of a successful translation. Now, we are going back as a linguist. We have to go back to the source etymology to understand what translation means. The English word translation has a Latin origin, which is also known as translation. The Latin term translation has two parts. One is trans, which means across, and latio, which has come from Latin word lotus, past participle form of fere, to carry or to bring. So Latin translation means to say carry something or to bring something across the border, across the barrier, or here across the languages. So translatio means carrying across or bringing across some information or idea from one language to another. Two terms are also related to this concept of carrying ideas from across languages. These are Greek terms called metaphrasis and paraphrasis, which would be coming quite frequently when we do a piece of translation task. Metaphrasis means a speaking across, which is equivalent, or other English term is, metaphrase, literal word for word translation. Simply, there is no scope for the translator to go beyond the level of the word. And there is paraphrasis, that is a saying in other words. That means paraphrase in English, which means a saying in other words. That means you have a liberty to go beyond the literal level to understand the things. So now, when we talk about translation, we have to keep these two issues very clearly in mind, that we can do both metaphrasing, that is, we can maintain formal equivalence where it is possible, and also we can do paraphrasing, where we can have a kind of dynamic equivalence, conceptual equivalence, cognitive equivalence, or semantic equivalence in the act of translation, rather than being literally exact equivalent with the source text. Now, since I have already said in my title that it is talking about lexical issues both in manual and machine translation, we need to understand what do we really mean by the term machine translation. I'm taking a definition which is very commonly used. MT or machine translation is a computer-based, normally a computer supported, automatic or a semi-automatic method that takes input in the form of a full sentence from a source language, which is normally known as SL, at a time, and generates corresponding meaningful full sentence in a target language. So this is a definition long back used in machine translation scheme, and this definition is still pertinent, still relevant, and gives us idea that rather than a human being involved in the whole scheme of translation, here the machine is doing the task on behalf of a human being, and all the factors that are taken into consideration for manual translation are also taken into consideration in machine translation. Besides, machine also takes into account some other issues which are purely technical. Now, expectation from a manual or machine translation. There are three layers of expectation. As an end user, as a user of the target language, when we are engaged or we are having an output of translation at my hand, what are our expectations and how these are going to be addressed? Now, expectation at the structure level, I have classified those expectations into three broad domains. At the structural level, if you have a source language and target language side by side, you can find out that we are expecting equivalence at least at the 6 levels. Like at the text level, starting from the lower level, we can go to the higher level. At the text level, there should be equivalence. At paragraph level, sentence level, clause level, phrase level, and lexical level. So we normally don't go beyond the lexical level. We don't go for morpheme level or character level or phoneme level equivalence. But while we do translation, we normally emphasize that these 6 structural equivalents should be achieved as far as it is possible. So I classify it, this is called structural equivalence, both in manual and machine translation. The second one, expectation for a manual and machine translation, I call it expectation at the semantic level. So after the structural level of equivalence, we talk about semantic level of equivalence. And when we emphasize on semantic level of equivalence, we ask for the 6 major types of equivalence, that there should be equivalence between the text meaning of the source text, and the meaning of the target text should be equivalent. At the paragraph level, the meaning should be equivalent. At the sentence level, there is an expectation that equivalence should be preserved here. even at the clause level, at the phrase level, at the word level. So you can find out that at the semantic level also, we are not only expecting that structural equivalence, we are also expecting that at the semantic level, we should have highest possible equivalence in the small subgroups. The third one is the most crucial one. Actually, when a translation fails actually here at the extra linguistic level. We also, in this level, what are the expectations? We have got more or 7 or 8 different layers of expectations, that there should be discourse level equivalence, pragmatic equivalence, idiomatic equivalence, proverbial equivalence, figurative equivalence, domain equivalence, culture equivalence, register equivalence, and sense equivalence. If you look at this, that these equivalents, which I try to draw your kind attention to those issues, are not so simplified one. These are so complex. It has so many properties, so many features embedded into it, that achieving equivalence at these two levels, at these two different levels in both the source and target language is really a challenging task. As I've already mentioned, majority of translation fails because of this reason, not because of the structural equivalence, not because of the semantic equivalence, but because of the extralinguistic equivalence. And particularly in cases of informative texts, in cases of scientific texts, in cases of knowledge texts, where we normally don't give extra linguistic equivalence much importance, we can ignore it. But in cases of creative text, imaginative text, literary text, and other kinds of texts, which has a very large chunk of information, large amount of data related to a language community or language or across languages, this becomes very crucial. So in cases of translation, both in cases of manual translation or machine translation, you cannot ignore these aspects. Now, when we do translation, you have to keep into mind, this is the frame model. I have tried to capture as a translator what I try to do and what are the machines can do and how our target can be achieved. At the one end, you can find out there is a source language, and at the other end, there is a target language. So our translation task actually trying to render a source text into target text. At the one end, there is a human translator, and other end, there is a machine translating system. Now they have 6 major stages one has to go through before they can achieve whatever small success they can think of in translation. In the first stage, know the source language first. Either the man or the machine who is trying to translate the target language or the language must know the source language properly, understand the content of the text, what is the theme or content of the text, understand the level of information or the kind of information embedded into the text, and it should be generated into the target language, proper rendering of information in the target language, and serving the purpose of the end users. So these 6 stages, I should say the 6 major conditions has to be fulfilled when we are doing a kind of translation, both in machine and manual translation. Now, basic qualifications of a human translator. Someone is talking, please, can you please mute your mic? Achha. Basic qualifications of a human translator. I have identified 20 linguistic or 20 qualifications for which are necessary to be a good translator. So one human translator needs enough training, should have proper orientation for translation, should have a very clear motivation that he or she is going to translate a particular piece of text, should have certain level of expertise, must have the love for the subject, target audience selection, he or she has to identify the target audience, target use determination, amateurish attempt may be required, commercial initiatives can be taken care of, practical knowledge of translation is necessary, you must have some amount of technical skills, proper teaching or training in the whole scheme of translation, past experience is an added advantage. If you have discourse expertise, then you can have a better translator. If you have a linguistic competence, you can produce better output. If you have extra linguistic knowledge, then you can use a far more successful translator. your cultural consciousness, your global knowledge, your communicative competence, and your linguistic generativity. So I have identified that there are at least 20 different aspects, different features, which are absolutely necessary for you to be a good translator. So now the question is, if I give this question to you, that can you please judge or find out that when a machine is engaged in translation, does a machine have all the 20 qualifications which we think relevant for a human being to be a good translator? Let us come to this question. This one, now I have put into the frame as a tabulating frame, and you can identify how machine and man can actually perform in the whole scheme of translation. Now, if you look at the 20 points I've raised here, that attributes, you can find out that all those in 20 attributes, a human has yes quality. But with regard to machine, there are some variations. Training, human can have certain amount of training, but machine has a very limited training at present, but it has a chance that you can increase. Orientation and motivation is a human quality. Machine doesn't have any orientation or any motivation, and it will never happen to a machine. Machine expertise, machine can have, but it may increase over the time. Love for the subject, man can have, machine cannot have, and it will never scale. Machine can have yes, but yes can be increased. Proper teaching can be possible, proper experiences can be possible, discourse expertise can be given partly, linguistic competence can be partly possible, extra linguistic knowledge may happen if artificial intelligence goes to a certain level, then perhaps the extra linguistic knowledge which is required for a human being can also be incorporated into the machine. Cultural consciousness, I doubt whether this kind of feature can be ever incorporated into the system. Global knowledge, that is very much possible that it can increase in the cases of machine, but the last two components, that is communicative components, I think it can never happen for a machine, and linguistic generativity, perhaps it will never happen to the machine. But the point is that if some of the points are actually changed, then perhaps machine can do like a human being. So this table gives a very preliminary idea to us how far a machine can go in the target of translating a text. And when compared with a human being who has got all the 20 qualities properly trained, customized, and imbibed by a human being, whether a machine can at all be successful to do the task like a human being. Now, there are some stages of translation. Here, I identify 5 major stages of translation. First is, it's a technical aspect, purely on the translation. Information extraction from the source language text. You have to read and identify what kind of information are actually embedded into the source text, and that has to be rendered in the target text. Information processing in the source language text, that is another more complex part. Information generation in the target language, that is information generation is another natural language generation component. Information validation in the target language, and acceptance of translation in the target language. So there are 5 major stages that has to be taken care of when you do translation, both by a human being or a system. Now, here, I'm trying to give you some idea that what are the major issues. Now, I'm actually entering into the main core area of my talk. Issues, what are the issues actually involved into it? For me, there are 2 broad types of issues. One is linguistic issues, another is extra linguistic issues. Within the frame of linguistic issues, there are lexical issues, syntactic issues, and semantic issues. And within the extra linguistic issues, there are cultural issues and humanistic issues. So I would emphasize only on the first component, that is the lexical issues. Also, I'll try to give some ideas about syntactic and semantic and cultural and humanistic issues, but I won't discuss those things into details. I'll concentrate mainly on the lexical issues. Now, there are 20 lexical issues for me in translation. One, I should just read those titles, not give into details, but so that you can, later on I can discuss these things one by one. But broadly, morphological analysis of words and forms, bilingual dictionary compilation, bilingual term bank compilation, translation equivalence generation, search for lexical match, avoidance of lexical mismatch, address of the problems of lexical gap, explore the possibility of lexical collocation, application of local word grouping, single word unit versus multi-word unit, multi-word unit versus single word unit, problem of choice among the synonyms, problem in translation of named entities, problems in translation of idioms and phrases, problems in translation of proverbial expressions, problems in translation of reduplicated words, culture-specific terms, phrasal verbs, jargon and technical terms, and slang and cons. So there are 20 issues, but you have full freedom to identify many more issues into it, and that would be far more appreciated. So it is not that there are only 20 issues, maybe there are another 20 issues which I have not been successful to highlight here, but you can definitely add those issues and discuss or take care of while you do translation. With regard to syntactic issues, I will just give you some ideas that major syntactic issues which come in translation are lexical reordering, phrasal ordering, anaphoric ambiguity resolving, sentence splitting or sentence joining, grammatical agreement, sentence alignment, and syntactic divergences. These are the broad syntactic issues which normally come in translation. The semantic issues are semantic analysis of the word in the source text, semantic analysis of multi-word units, analysis of phrases, analysis of idioms, idiomatic expressions, proverbial expressions, issues of lexical ambiguity which are embedded into the source text, structural ambiguity and thematic ambiguity, and polysemy and sense disambiguity. Obviously, again, you have full right to add many more issues and aspects related to semantics in the case of translation. The extralinguistic issues, which I tried to capture here, related to discourse and pragmatics, sociolinguistics and ethnolinguistics, semiotics, geo or ecolinguistic issues, life and living, cultures and practices, beliefs and faiths, customs and rituals, history and heritage. Again, you can add something more if you think that these are all relevant in cases of translation. One thing should be taken into serious consideration, it should be taken into mind that all those issues are not that all the issues would come together in a single piece of text. It never happens. Depending on the nature of text, depending on the kind of translation you are involved in, depending on the kind of source text given to the system for translation, various issues would come up, and mostly that some of the issues are relevant in a particular piece of text. In a cultural text, we will find out that more cultural beliefs and rituals or customs or practices or history and heritage are more relevant than other issues. In cases of scientific text, you can find out that maybe the thematic or content or the information which is embedded into the source text is more important, more relevant than other issues. So it may vary depending on the nature of the text, but broadly, these are the issues which generally come into picture. There are humanistic issues. As you know that since translation is an applied area, and most of the time in cases of manual translation, we have noted that the quality of a translation depends not only the kind of text being translated, not only the kind of technology or the resources or linguistic resources being deployed in the task of translation, it also depends on the skill of a human translator, kind of training, kind of exposure, kind of expertise, kind of experience a person has, and kind of orientation it has. So I have identified those 20 features that becomes very much relevant in cases of humanistic issues. In an experiment which I carried out in my department, that I gave a piece of text, a newspaper text, to 5 of my students, English text published in a newspaper, a one full paragraph I have given to 5 of my students who are coming from exactly same background, honors in English, masters in linguistics, and doing PhD in and other advanced research in linguistics. I given those texts to the 5 students to translate them and never consult with each other. So what I found is that each translation each of the translations which produce those informer, the translators, are actually different from the other. And I noted that is the research is still not completed, but I found that there are many humanistic issues or the skill, the exposure, the knowledge, the experience of the person, because individual, because very crucial in successful, useful translation generation. So from that study, I found out that there are certain issues, humanistic issues, which become very relevant in translation. So I have identified here 8 features like skills and expertise of any translator, knowledge of the source language and the target language of the translator engaged, the level of experience of the translator, the kind of sociocultural exposure the person has received while he is engaged in translation, the emotional level of involvement of the person in the whole task of translation, the kind of motivation the person shows in translation, or the professional attitude or aptitude, professional attitude the person shows in the task of translation, and his translational aptitude. So these are the 8 factors which I have identified that becomes very much crucial in translating the texts. So I identified them as humanistic issues. Now, next 20 slides, if I'm not mistaken, should be the pure lexical issues. But let me make one thing very clear here, that here I'll raise the issues, but answers should come from you people. I raise the issues which when I've come across those issues while I'm translating texts from English to Bangla or Hindi to Bangla. So I have formulated them in the form of questions, that if you come across this kind of problem, how you are going to deal with that. So these slides are basically questions to all my participants. Now, translation of proper names. My first question is, when you come across a proper name in a source text, what do you do it? Should it be translated, transliterated, or not translated? I'm really confused. Suppose in English you come across Mr. Brown, Mr. Black, Mr. White, or St. Harris, or Holy John, or Johnson. So these are very common proper names available in English. Now you have to seriously think whether you should keep those proper names unchanged, or you just do the transliteration of the words into your script, or you are going to translate them into your language. I'm not giving any solution. I'm just putting these questions to you people. You think that when you come across the person names of such kinds, what you are going to do. So you have to take a decision and proceed accordingly. Now, think of place names. Should it be transliterated or not translated? Unfortunately, I have noted that in Bangla, I find quite often that many of the times, sometimes the place names are transliterated, sometimes are not translated, just translated. See, in cases of New Delhi, we say New Delhi is basically a transliterated form. Hyderabad remains Hyderabad. But Calcutta is changed into Kolkata, Bangalore changed into Bengaluru, Mysore changed into Mysuru, Madras changed into Chennai. So in English text, I get Madras. In Bangla text, I get Chennai. So see, you have to decide that in cases of place names, whether you should always keep the place names unchanged or it should be translated. It may vary from person to person or individual to individual, or particularly in cases of scientific and technical terms. I'll come later on in this course. And you can come across that this is a very critical situation where sometimes we transliterate, sometimes we translate. Country names. See, should it be transliterated or translated? See, America remains America, Canada remains Canada. But the moment you find in the English text India, immediately in Bangla we find it is Bharat. In West Bengal English text it is West Bengal, but in Bangla text it is Paschim Bongo. In English text, it is Egypt. In Bangla text, it is Misr. In English text, it is China. In Bangla text, it is Chin. Is it happening the same thing in other Indian languages also? Do you follow the same norm? Do you do the transliteration or translation? Please think seriously. And whether, I'm not sure, I don't know whether which strategy is the better one. But in my case, I find that both the practices are going on. Sometimes it is transliterated, sometimes it is translated. And there is no justification or logical justification why it is translated and why not translated, and why it is translated, not transliterated. Now, for a human being, we have two options, and for the machine, it becomes a real tough job to decide whether India should be remained as India in Bangla texts or should be changed into Bharat. It's an open question to all of us to seriously think what should be our best strategy in translation. But this is a very serious linguistic or lexical issue in translation. Multi-word names. Here we can find out the translation and transliteration. I've given one example, Indira Gandhi International Airport. How do you translate it in your language? In Bangla, we say Indira Gandhi Antarjatik Airport. So here you can notice here that Indira Gandhi remains unchanged, international immediately changed into Bangla, and airport again remains unchanged. So there is very confusions that within a single multi-word string, one or two strings are changed, remaining strings are not translated. Say United Arab Emirates, sometimes it is in Bangla it is United or Arab Amir Shahi, Samjukta Arab Amir Shahi. Sometimes it is translated, sometimes not. International Monetary Fund, sometimes translated, sometimes not. Even United States of America, sometimes it is translated, sometimes not. But point is that these are all multi-word units, proper names, and we don't have any consistency in translation of these multi-word units. So we have to think seriously how to translate or translate these terms when we come across in a piece of text. Is there any rule? Is there any system? Is there any method or pattern of translation? And when we train our system, machine, to translate those named entities, what would be the strategy or method of translating these terms? Now, there is another very dicey problem. Translation of pronominal forms. I'm giving the second person form. Say English word, you can find out you. You can be singular or plural, and it can be plus minus honorific. Now this particular word you, in Bengali we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 alternatives. One is tui, tora, tumi, tumra, apni, apnara. So I get for English word you 6 possible alternatives available in my language. Now when as a human translator I'm translating this text, I'm really confused to identify or to decide which of the terms of these 6 possible alternatives should be appropriately selected. Whether one should be selected or two or all possible selection, I have no idea. But when I try to train my system, the system is really confused and it becomes far more challenging a task because of the selection of these terms, the whole grammatical agreement, subject-verb agreement or concordance would be changed. So it is a real problem for us how to translate those single English term you into Bengali. Many of the Indian languages has this problem. Next, you can find out the third person singular. English has third person singular he or she. It can be singular and it can be plus or minus honorific. In Bangla, we have got 3 alternatives, say, tini, and uni. If I use say, it is plus singular minus honorific. If I use tini, it is plus singular and plus honorific, and uni is plus singular plus honorific, but between tini and uni has some discourse level differences, finer differences. So now whenever I come across this term he or she in English, I myself as a translator, as well as my machine, is really confused. It has three alternatives available to him, to it, to decide which one would be the best selection. Translation of third person plural form. Say, in English there is only one form, they. It is a plural form and it has plus minus honorificity. In Bangla, we have got three alternatives: Tara, Tara with negative generalization, and Unara. So Tara is plus plural minus honorific, Tara is plus plural plus honorific, and Unara is plus plural plus honorific, and they have finer distinction of senses based on the context of the use of the terms. So here again, I'm really confused to select what are the best alternatives can be available for me out of those three options for the appropriate translation for the term they. Now, I have some options open for me to decide which of these three alternatives which can be best used in cases of translation. I can refer to the whole contextual frames of the source text where this particular term they is used. And depending on the information retrieved from the particular piece of text, I can decide out of these three possible candidates which one can be used. And that kind of knowledge has to be given to the system, to the machine, so that machine also can select, like a human being, to identify which of these three forms is the best alternatives in a particular context as an equivalent for the term they. Now, translation of relational terms. This is another very crucial issue for us. In Bangla, if you can find out that English word aunt, uncle, sister-in-law, and cousin, you can find out that there are only one terms in English. In Bangla, we have for aunt, masi, pisi, kaki, jetima, mami, khuri, and 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, or 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 alternatives available. Which one of these 3 or 6 alternatives should be the best one for aunt? I am not sure, because it depends on many other issues about the discourse, about the topic, about the content, about the sentential context, and many other issues to be taken into consideration to decide that in this particular sentence A, masi is the most appropriate. Sorry. In the other sentence, maybe jetima or mami is more appropriate. So in same thing in cases of uncle, mama, meso, pise, kaka, jetha, khura, or sister-in-law, Sally or Bodhi, cousin, mamato, mastuto, pistuto, kurtuto, jertuto. So there are many possible alternatives. So it is a question of alternatives and question of the selection of the most appropriate equivalent from the target language in translation is one of the crucial issues at the lexical level. Now, next question. Translation of titles, acronyms, and abbreviations. If you look at the titles like Mr., Mrs., MA, MSc, PhD, Doctor, ST, and Saint, how you are going to treat them? Are you going to translate them, or you are going to put them as it is in translation in the target language? I have to think about it. We have to seriously think whether Mr. should be kept as Mr. or Mrs. should be kept as Mrs. or MA degree should be changed into local our language-based terms. Think of acronyms. So here, if you can find out the acronyms like NATO, WHO, RAW, CAT, OPEC, CRY, RADAR, PETA, NET, these are all acronyms in the sense because each letter of the construction actually carries a full word, and they combine together to form another word. That is, NATO is a single word, WHO is a single word. Now, when you translate those terms, what is your strategy? Should you say the full form, or should you just translate or transliterate as NATO or change into it? Say WHO, in pandemic situation, WHO has become very important term. So here, I don't know whether all the Indian languages are now translating as World Health Organization or simply as WHO. I have no idea whether they are keeping it as World Health Organization or translating it into their mother tongue or into the in different Indian languages, or keeping as a full form. So translation of acronyms in different languages becomes a very crucial issue. So there are three alternates, three possible questions: whether it can be transliterated, whether the full form should be transliterated, or the exact acronym can be preserved as it is. With regard to abbreviations, now these are also abbreviations, but these are not, these are words in its own way. Abbreviations are not words. So like IT, MT, NLP, IR, DR, PT, between, lit, root, PC, or ORSD, these are the abbreviated terms. My next question is for all of us, how we are going to treat those lexical items when you come across them in your source text. Should you keep IT as IT in your target language, or you should give the full form of the word and transliterate or translate it in your language? So you have got four alternatives, possible alternatives. You can keep the whole word, the IT as an IT, or translate it into, transliterate into your language, give the full form in English, or you can render it or translate the full form of English form into your mother tongue. So these terms or such kind of expressions are quite frequent, quite natural, and heavy in your language, and you have to seriously think about those things, how you are going to translate. Translation of exocentric compound words, that has been another challenge for us. I'm not talking about endocentric compound words, because as you know that those people who are coming from the background of linguistics, they very clearly understand the difference between endocentric and exocentric compounds. The uniqueness of exocentric compounds is that the surface meaning of the construction is not the underlying meaning. That means the literal meaning and the figurative meaning, or the third meaning, underlying meaning, which actually represents, are different. Now I'm just putting on this question that this kind of expressions, when you come across this kind of expressions in your language or in your source text, how you are going to translate them? Are you going to keep their literal sense preserved or its figurative senses? I have no answer. I'm just putting these questions to you. Please think seriously and how you are going to deal with that, whether you should say sweetheart should be a heart which is sweet, or it should be fiancé, or a fish plate, a plate of fish, or something, a piece of iron rod given under the rail, or something like that. So blackbird, it's a blackbird, or a bird which is black in color, or a different kind of bird. So these kind of exocentric compounds are real challenge. I myself has faced a lot of problems to deal with those exocentric compounds. Now, translation of collocations. As you know that collocations is basically, you can find out that the uniqueness of these components, the set of collocations which have taken from the British National Corpus, you can notice here that in these constructions, the one word, the W2T2 is constant, that is time. W1 is a variable. And every time W1 varies, the sense of the expression changes. So high time, in time, leisure time, sometime, transit time, backward time, half time, full time, short time, good time, terrible time, long time, or hard time, first time, next time, last time, forward time, or every time, you can very clearly understand that the nature of unique collocation which is taking place within these constructions, because of the variability of W1, the meaning of the construction is changing. So this is a unique kind of combinations of collocations, and the meaning change. So while you are translating texts, you have to take seriously these kinds of connotations or collocations and try to understand their connotative meaning rather than their denotative meaning to translate them properly. So my argument here is that, or my suggestion is that, while you translate a piece of text, collocations has to be taken care of with extra caution, to get proper right translation. Group of local words, another again from BNC. If you can find out that in the meantime, if I try to translate each of the single words separately, I won't get the idea which is being expressed by this phrase in the meantime. So my argument is that you have to do a kind of local word grouping of those expressions together to get the meaning. So while you are translating, these lexical groups has to be identified properly. Their meaning has to be clubbed together, and keeping these ideas together, you have to translate. So look at the time and time again is giving actually single sense. And if you want to have a single sense, then all the four lexical items have to be taken together. So this is called local word grouping, a system mechanism normally used in corpus linguistic analysis. And these groups can give us very idea how to identify those group of words and translate them. Second one is, this one is translation of idiomatic expressions and proverbs. As you very clearly know, translation of idioms and proverbs is very difficult task, because to get the actual idea embedded under the idiom or proverbs in the source language and to render it into the target language is very difficult, because it may happen many of the times that particular idiomatic expression or proverbial expression is available in the source language, but the translational equivalence is not available in the target language. Here is a small list. I can give you here the small list, very small list, that I got nearly say 1200 idiomatic expressions from English, which has proper Bengali translational equivalence. Thank God that these are available, and these are all collected from my corpus to show that there are some idiomatic expressions or proverbial expressions in English which can be properly rendered into the proper appropriate equivalence in Bangla. But in a language that may happen that that kind of equivalents are not available. In that case, one has to decide how those idiomatic expressions should be translated, and if there in additional paraphrase has to be added there. Now, technical and scientific terms. Now, here I have given a list of scientific terms like actuator, alternator, generator, say harmonics or converter, current or feeder or conductor, mostly some electrical engineering terms. Now I'm putting a simple question to you. If you come across such kind of terms, and when you find that appropriate paribhasha or technical terms is not available in the target language, what would be your strategy? What kind of method you are going to adopt? Are you going to generate a new term to express the idea, or transliterate it, or give a new term, or generate a new term, or produce a new term and translate it? You have to think seriously how you are going to deal with those scientific and technical terms which are not normally available in many of the target languages. So there are some of the terms I have already mentioned, but if you translate a scientific or technical text, you can come across a huge load of terms of this kind, which are very difficult to translate. Now, translation of medical terms. Here are some medical texts. I have taken some terms like diabetics, cancer, or gastritis, asthma, thyroid, goiter, kidneys, nephritis, cardiology, or the gastroenteritis, neonatology, or quadriplegia. So if you look at those terms, these are scientific terms, in certain cases, you can find out that, look at the term cancer. As you all know, that cancer has an equivalent term in Sanskrit like karkat. Now, if you have a term karkat available in your language, for a language like Sanskrit or like Bangla or Odia, you can find out that a term like karkat is available for cancer. As a translator, I'm really in problem. Should I give karkat, which is less intelligible to the people, or should I preserve cancer, which is more intelligible to the people? So the argument is, now the question as a translator is quite confusing. Should I keep the term cancer as a transliterated one, because that is more easily understood by the mass, by the people, by the target audience? Or should I be honest that since a translational term is available in Bangla, I should go for karkot. Think of diabetics. Almost all Indian languages, including Sanskrit, Bangla, and others, have an appropriate term like madhumeha. But the term madhumeha is almost intelligibility is nearly zero compared to diabetics. So if in normal conversation, we always use the term diabetics rather than madhumeha. So while we are translating, if you think that you are translating a particular text for a target community, which can easily understand diabetics rather than madhumeha, it is rational and wise that you should keep the transliterate the term diabetics. And in cases of machine translation, you have to also keep in mind that machine has to understand these things also, or you have to make an algorithm in such a way that machine selects the most appropriate one and renders it properly. Here, this is related to the most cultural specific terms. Here I can have given that there are some culture specific terms, and when you come across those culture specific terms like instruments, ethnic groups, occupations, food items, music, songs and dance, flora and fauna, festivals and rituals, mythology, games and sports. So there are a large number of terms of this kind which are purely culture specific, community specific. My question is to all of you, whether you are going to translate them or transliterate them, or you should add one paraphrase along with the translation so that it is understandable to the target communities. With regard to the machine translation, it is far more a complex task. I don't know how we are going to resolve this question, but all those three possibilities are still there available for a system. Now, translation of phrasal verbs is another important part. I've enlisted some of the phrasal verbs to show that break down, break in, break into, break up, or break out, but in the present condition, the most common phrasal verb or group verb which we are using now, there's lockdown. So should it be lockdown, should be lockdown, or something equivalent term you can generate in your mother tongue and translate the text related to pandemic. Now, these are the very important questions which we come across at the time of translation. So these group verbs or phrasal verbs have specific meaning, specific ideas, specific concepts. How you are going to give those concepts represented in your target language is a real term, is a real questions for us. So these group verbs, which you come across quite often in a source text, becomes a real challenge for us to translate properly in our mother tongue. Translation of jargon. As you know, jargon is basically a computer-based, domain-based, domain-specific terms. Look at the computer science and related, like window, mouse, monitor, hardware, or hybrid model, or cloud computing, or floppy disk, or say Hadoop or parallel computation. I'm really confused to understand how these things should be translated. Or should we preserve them? And if we preserve them, the question is that the authenticity of translation is greatly reduced. People may not be happy that, okay, why you are preserving those English terms. And at the same time, if I translate those terms into my language, then it becomes that the things becomes so complicated to understand that common people really very badly affected. Think of the cricket, sports. Cricket, bat, bowler, middle, leg by, silly point, defender, forward, half volley, corner, nutmeg, penalty, red card. So the sports terms, whether you are going to translate. So these jargon, then language specific, or sorry, domain specific jargon, are real term, real lexical issues in the cases of translation. So if you're a good translator, you have to find out a middle path by which you are successful enough to deal with the things. Now, translation of slang and obscene words, that becomes ethical issue also. Now, if you come across, say, these such kind of terms like bitch, fuck, or swine, or bloody whore, or bastard, or some terms like doggy style, blowjob, or camel toe, you are really confused whether ethically you are entitled to keep those terms or translate those terms into text. When I was translating certain terms, certain texts for British Airways, for Indian languages, particularly for Bangla, I came across a large number of terms which I have collected from them itself. And I was really confused whether I should give an appropriate term, Bangla term. And most of the time, the Bangla term which is available for them are actually not connotatively equivalent. So we can give a term, but that is not perhaps all the time equivalent. And perhaps in most of the cases, appropriate translations are not at all available. So the best option is that should we go for transliteration, or should we add some paraphrasing, or you can think of developing some new strategies or methods to deal with these kinds of situations. But important thing that this is one of the serious lexical issues in translation which has been rocking us for years. Now, translation of obsolete words, that is another issue. When you are translating a text, say Shakespearean text, you can find out that there are many terms used which has no meaning at all. We cannot understand those obsolete words. These are dead words. How to translate them? I'm giving some examples taken from the British English, collected from obsolete terms database. Say hagar magar, it was used in 1530s to act in a secretive manner, or say a twaddle, to gossip or to talk idle. That was used in 16th century. So it becomes very difficult for, or like say words, say a jar guggle. These are the words, obsolete words. So how to deal with those obsolete words? How to translate them? How to translate them? How to account for properly so that the readers can actually understand those meanings of the words. But these are really lexical challenges for translation task. Archaic words. Archaic words means those words not dead, but very old words, ancient words, has no meaning, but only in a very archaic text you can come across. Say, I have collected these, say, Sueven, a vision or a dream, 101 Nights by 1001 Nights, Arabian Nights, a famous storybook, which has been translated by Richard Barton. So Sueven is a word which means a vision or a dream. How to translate it? It's a very real problem for me. Cozen, to swindle by artful deception, derived from an Italian horse trader. So these kinds of archaic words you can come across in some old texts. Now the question, when you are trying to analyze those texts, understand those texts, and render into this target language, you have to come across these such kind of lexical issues, and you have to think seriously how you can address those issues properly so that your translation becomes most trustworthy and useful to the target users. Translation of nonce words. Nonce words means a kind of words which once, at least once, is used by a single author, by an individual author, and the author was the first person to use the word and the last person also. After that, it has never been used. I have collected some nonce words here. You can show you that vanquos is a verb that means to mass. It's Dick of Devon. It was used in 1926. After that, it has never been used. Okay, let me take something, a new one, say, Jacoseriosity. Noun being half of the jest, half serious. Johnson used it in 1885. So when you translate a text written by Johnson, you are really confused how to deal with those kinds of nonce words. So nonce words is a very common term, that is common issue in translation, particularly literary texts. You can come across some words, not so frequently, but this happens, that while you are translating a particular piece of text written, say, 500 years ago, you can come across some terms, and you have to think seriously how to deal with those nonce words. There is another important question. Choice among the synonyms in translation. Now, I have been threatened, rather, I have been really in trouble to think of these things. See, in English, there is a word called, for woman, you can come across lady, wife, female, damsel, girl, and many more. But in cases of Bangla, you can find out that there are many equivalents: Nari, Strilok, Mohila, Bama, Abola, Ramoni. These all refer to women. And these are also, English terms also refer to women. Now, since I have got so many alternatives available in the source text, and so many alternatives available in the target text also, I'm really confused whether Nari would be a best choice or Strilok would be the best choice for the term lady, or wife and Stri would be the best choice, or something different. My question is, say, in cases of man, there is a fellow, gentleman, guy, person, sir, husband, and many other meanings. Look at the word home, abode, apartment, bungalow. So you have got so many terms to refer to the particular concept. Now, based on the concept, based on the idea, central theme of the word, you have to select. But question is, the point is, when you have got several synonyms, both in the source language as well in the target language, in the source language, you find that out of multiple possible synonyms, only one is used. And in the cases of target language, you have got many alternatives available to you, and you have to select one out of those alternatives as the most appropriate one. And that becomes a real tough job for a translator to decide how one should go for that. Now here, polysemy and sense selection in translation. This is basically a technical aspect. As you know that polysemy is a very common word or common situation in all languages. A particular piece of text in the source language can have many terms which have multiple senses. Look at that. Here's an example word which has senses, say 5 different senses. And all those 5 different senses are possible to retrieve from the source text itself. Now it has 5 translation equivalents based on context. If the context is taken into consideration, based on the context, we can get 5 different senses. And based on the context, you have to select the appropriate senses in the target language. So translating polysemous entries or polysemous expressions in the source language is a real challenge, not only for manual translation, but also for machine translation. This expression like head in English, often or most common frequently referred to the example is head. His head has in English 120 different meanings. And out of those 120 different meanings, particularly 1 or 2 specific meaning has to be selected based on its occurrence in a particular piece of text. Alternatively, when you are translating the text or a word, you have to take into consideration in the particular which context it is used, and accordingly you have to select the appropriate meaning. If I say that he is the head of the family, you have to select one appropriate translation for the target language. But if I say he's the head of the country, then you have to select another word. So in such polysemic expressions, translation is a real difficult task. Now here, context-based selection of the translations. This is basically, I'm giving an example which is collected from the British National Corpus again. This is perhaps the last but one slide. Here you can see that the word term manage. I have given only around 13 examples. In every case, you can find out the word term manage has a different meaning. We can manage the course of attendance of the students. Here the term manage actually refers to the regulate. This meaning is actually derived from the application of concordance of the British National Corpus. I'm just citing those examples from this example to show how it becomes a real problem for us in translation. But whenever I say that you can manage an automatic revolver, it means that you can handle an automatic revolver. But whenever he can manage a wild horse, it means he can take charge of the wild horse. Or you cannot manage by yourself, that means make use of. Or perhaps I can manage next Saturday, that means I may be free to attend that on. So you can find out that there are 13 or 14 examples here. In each case, the term manage has a different meaning based on its syntactic frame or information embedded into the sentence. And each sentence has a different meaning embedded or expressed in the construction. So while we are translating, taking these context-based meaning, I have to select the most appropriate one. If I'm entitled to translate the whole sentence, these sentences into your mother tongue, I am sure that each one should have a different term from your mother tongue as an appropriate translation. So what I'm trying to hammer here, to argue here is that you have to take the polysemic nature of the words, identify the exact contextual meaning of the word when it is used in a piece of text, in a context, and taking into consideration the contextual sense of the word, you have to select the most appropriate translation, if available, from your mother tongue. Conclusion, what I understand, I have tried, that is, there are 20 slides, which I tried highlight 20 different lexical issues related to translation. Most of these issues are actually I personally have faced while translating English and Hindi text into Bangla. I've tried to sum up my experiences here and raise those issues to you to understand that while you are doing those translations tasks, you can also face similar problems. So to conclude, translation is basically a very applied field, as you all know. It can grow with linguistic and extra linguistic resources. The more linguistic resources we have, the more extra linguistic resources and knowledge we have, the discipline grows, our knowledge grows, our understanding grows, and we can have better understanding of better skill in translation. It is a highly specialized field. It is not everybody's job. Although everybody is a good translator in his or her way, but while we talk about at an academic level or technical level, it's a very specialized job. It is a test bed of various theories and models of linguistics, grammar, culture, knowledge, and technology. It also verifies various theories of syntax, various theories of semantics, as well as discourse. It checks if lexicon of a language is fruitfully utilized into it. The very crucial issue, whether the lexicon available for the target language is appropriate or sufficient enough to develop to carry out a good translation. It also examines if a word sense analysis and sense retrieval and pragmatic interpretations are at all applied in cases of translation. Finally, at present, we find that the availability of corpus, which is now digitally available to us, makes a very significant contribution in enhancing the skill and capability, not only of a human translator, but of an MT system. In both cases, we are using the information retrieved from corpora by applying various different tools and technology, textual processing, and retrieving information necessary data and ideas, concepts and information for successful translation. Not only at the individual level, at the humanistic level, but at the machine translation level. So thank you very much. Here I end. So I'm open for questions and comments. If there is any questions or comments, I'll be happy to respond. Is there any question, comments?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Professor Niladri.
Yes, sir.
In fact, no, you are such a wonderful person. I think this that you have covered in 1 hour all the nooks and corners of translation issues and theories. We really enjoyed your lecture.
Thank you very much, sir.
I don't have exactly any questions for on your lecture. It's very clear, a thorough and very elaborate lecture you have made. But I want to give one of my own comment like that.
Yes.
See, theoretically, the issues you elaborated are it is still there. Okay.
Yes.
How far the languages have faced those things depends upon the language concerned.
Yes.
As I feel, as far as Tamil language concerned, for the technical terms and medicinal terms, etc., we have come out with so many equivalents concerning English to Tamil to English like that. I don't know about Bangla, how far they have been acute.
For Bangla, for Bangla, it is not there. But Tamil, I know that. For Tamil Nadu, a lot of people are actually working on it, and they
even
one of
the participants, he also commented, I could read it, that as far as Tamil, most of the issues are can be tackled like that. But I have observed from your lecture, the importance rather of your lecture is that from the corpus point of view, in terms of machine translation, okay, your lecture has shown what should be taken into consideration, what should be observed when we make a corpus for the purpose of machine translation. So anyone who is thinking of translation from one language to another language, okay, they can make the corpus taking into the consideration or taking to mind your lecture, the points and the elaboration that you have made. That way, your lecture is a very, very important and significant one, I feel.
Thank
This
you.
is my
Thank
comment on the lecture.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question or comments? I would be happy to appreciate. And Professor Shanmugam sir.
Yes, Professor Niladri.
Yes, sir.
Right. I am fully convinced that the lexical issues, the lexical problems you encounter in manual as well as in machine translation has been reported very well. It is a well-organized paper, and I think there will not be any questions because covered, and it is a wonderful presentation. I thank you for enlightening us in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is there any other comment?
The synonyms word, that also they have some specific context. You see that there is some synonyms for the close and set.
Yes.
It has to use a particular place. We cannot use for the some places we cannot use set, some place we cannot use that close also.
Yes, yes.
That means it has some context, some specific place for the putting that particular word. So that means we can use some statistical based method for the getting to solve these issues to ambiguity issues, lexical issues. We can resolve this using that particular statistical. Can we use that statistical method for the translation to resolve these problems?
Yes. Actually, you are substantiating my argument that since words has multiple senses and multiple synonyms, we can definitely use some statistical models or statistical calculation or frequency or some kinds of distribution mechanism to identify in which context the word is being used and in which sense it is used in a particular context. Once that can be identified and measured statistically, that can be definitely embedded into the system, empty system, or that knowledge can enrich a translator to identify what can be the best possible translation in the target language.
No, sir, even though statistical method also sometimes it will not work in the particular context.
That is why the problem.
That is, we have to use the both model is a rule based as well as the statistical base. We have to use.
I absolutely agree with you, because this is the way actually we can deal with the problems of human translation. Since machine, as I have in my slides, I have shown that machine cannot do so many things at the time. So human support, human aided translation perhaps is a better alternative to come with a usable or workable solution.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
So is there any other? Yes.
So sorry for the interruption, sir. Hello,
no problem.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, audible. Sir, please go ahead.
Okay, sir. So this is Ganesh. Sir, I have a question from your previous slides. That one of your slides that you have shown that there is a term called geocriticism, geolinguistics. What is it? Geolinguistics?
Geolinguistics and ecolinguistics. That is with a slice. With this slash you have given geocom ecolinguistics.
Yes, sir.
So geolinguistic. Yes, please.
So can you elaborate that?
Yes. As far as I understand, I can elaborate here like that.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Geolinguistics and ecolinguistics is a new concept, but actually it's basically old wine in a new bottle.
Okay.
The basic argument is related to Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Okay.
That in your linguistic knowledge, understanding the language, the geocultural or geo-ecolinguistic background where you are coming from has a role to play.
Oh, I think it sounds like it is somehow related to the vocabulary of the local culture.
No. Local, this is one of the components. But basic thing is that suppose if I give you a term, which is, can you understand the meaning of the term until and unless you have certain you have some exposure to it? Suppose if I say, what is bunip? Can you please identify what is bunip? You have no
never,
idea.
Sir. Never. No idea.
That means an individual's whole understanding of his language is basically controlled by some cultural and geoclimatic factors where that individual is actually exposed to.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
So my suggestion would be, if you want to really explore, this is a very new area of research.
Yes, sir.
Professor Aaron Stipp.
Yes, sir. I'm working his course.
Ecolinguistics course. They are have introduced the ecolinguistics course.
The University of Glasgow is also working on that particular area.
Yeah, that particular area, Aaron is working. He is my friend. He is working there, and I am also a group member of this community.
Yes,
and we did a fantastic study. I can give you see.
Okay, sir.
One of my papers, I have shown that in Bangla, we use a lot of animal names for addressing, like Gadha, Goru. You are a Gadha kotha, what a ass you are, or what a Goru, what a cow you are. So, but point is that we use the term, the most frequently used term is Gadha, donkey, ass.
Okay, sir.
But unfortunately, in Bengal, particularly in Bengal, the use or the living or the existence of Gadha is almost zero.
Oh.
We have very frequent use of cow. Cow is very frequent animal, or most very frequent existing animal to us. So from a birthday of a child knows what a cow is.
Okay.
But till I became aged one at the age of 30 and went to another state or Bihar or Jharkhand, I never knew what a donkey is except in pictures.
Yeah, exactly.
So now when the whole community don't have any exposure to an animal like this, how the term, the Gadha, becomes so frequent in our language.
Yeah. It is all about the picturization of that particular
it is not so simple. It is not so simple that I can claim that this is done. But point is that this is an important area of investigation, that when a particular term becomes so frequent in the vocabulary of the community, and it does not have any relevance in the ecological frame or geoclimatic frame of the community, how come that particular term becomes so frequent in the language?
Oh,
this is a very open question.
In this way, I have one more question, that now this particular study, it has a space for linguistics, having a correspondence with, I think, indigenous language studies or culture studies.
Exactly. It is also important to that. If you can get sufficient knowledge and information from the indigenous languages, that can also enrich us to understand why that particular social phenomena are actually existing in my community.
Oh, super, sir, super.
So that kind of things are actually area of ecolinguistics, and how we conceptualize our nature, our environment, our community, our society, and all those things actually come linguistically conceptualized. All those things come into area of geolinguistics and ecolinguistics.
Okay, sir.
As far as I have understood, I'm not very expert in this area, but my understanding is something like this.
Yes, sir. I got your perspective too. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, sir. So, is there any?
Umaraj sir, I think you had a question.
Yes.
Umaraj sir.
Is there anybody else?
No, that question is there on the side. Good morning, sir. Good afternoon. I'm Umaraj from Madurai Kamaraj University.
What
are the parameters for good translation, like that I am asking?
What are the best parameters and good translation?
The good is also a relative term.
Yes.
Good for someone is not good for some other one. So,
what do you mean by parameter? Is it a cultural parameter, or linguistic parameter, or structural parameter, or semantic parameter? Which parameter you are talking about?
No, all parameters I am asking, it is unbiased, because the word good, everybody is telling it is a good translation, something like that. But yes. Good is also a relative term, I am telling. So good is also a relative. Bad translation, good translation, it is a relative term. good for some. For me, it is good, but for someone, it is not good. So, the unbiased, what are the parameters? How we had to measure? How to validate something like that? It is comes under the validation part.
So in that case, in the past 4 slides, what I have mentioned as issues, structural issues, semantic issues, extra linguistic issues, and humanistic issues. Okay. So these are basically, in your term, can be the useful parameters that you can maintain maximum structural equivalence. You can maintain maximum semantic equivalence. You can carry through the cultural and extra linguistic information across languages. And by a statistical measure, if you find that 100 or near equivalence is achieved, the degree of near equivalence actually determines the quality of the good translation.
I am asking quantify. It is not the quality, that word.
Quantify. Quantify. I have never tried to quantify those things. So I have no idea. Rather, you can enlighten me how this is possible at all to quantify. Because if you put a translation side by side and source text, then there are certain parameters which normally we take into consideration to judge whether a translation is rightly done. But I have never applied any quantifying method to judge the accurate level of accuracy.
Because, okay, thank you.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, there's one more question.
Yes.
That is, English and the Indian language have different verb patterns.
Yes.
So how to overcome this type of different structure patterns in the process of translation?
There is no easy way or cutout method. You come across a syntactic pattern in English. You analyze how the verb pattern is developed in English or generated in English in the source text. You select out of many possibilities available in your target language. Which one you think that most appropriate one, you render it that. So it is not there is a well framed or there is a well calculated frame which is available in English, and that similar kind of constructions or similar kind of frame can be applied for Bangla or in a target language. That never happens. You get one construction verb agreement in English. You find multiple possible equivalents in your target language. You select out of possible manys which one is more appropriate, more relevant, more suitable for your translation. You select that. In cases of machine translation also, we find that one of the 4 or 5 possibilities, one is more appropriate, and there also you use some statistical measurement calculations, identify which is more frequent one, which is more recurrent one, which is better understood by the communities, and which is more domain specific, which is more contextualized. And based on those certain kind of conditions, we select the most appropriate one. Okay?
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you. So it is already 4:30, so I think we should better pack up things. So now handing over my responsibilities to the Bharatiya University Department. Once again, I give my heartfelt thanks to all the audience and members and the Department of Linguistics, Bharatiya University, giving me an opportunity to share my ideas and to learn from you people also. So best wishes and have a good day.
Final word, Professor Niladri.
Yes,
I
sir.
request to you from Ravi Shankar that next time when we come to us, you should talk about the issues related to the machine translation between any 2 languages that you are well aware of or very good with those things. So that will add more information to us after this wonderful lecture.
Actually,
please
sir,
keep in mind.
In that sense that I talked on machine translation and issues on machine translation, corpus-based machine translation, several times at CIL Mysore. On their courses on translation. So I thought that, okay, let me diverge a little bit. So I requested the organizing committee that can you allow me to talk on lexical issues on translation?
Sure.
Because maybe next time I get a chance, I would emphasize on machine translation part.
Sure, we will have a chance to listen to your lecture, sir. Thank you. Okay. Very kind of you. Thank you for a wonderful lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. So goodbye to all of you. Have a nice time.
So 1 minute.
I can,
So 1 minute.
yes,
Let me
yes.
propose the vote of thanks, sir.
Oh, Professor Bijanji. Yeah, please.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. In today's session, we had one of our distinguished professor of linguistics from Kolkata, who gave a talk on the issues, lexical issues involved in translation, manually as well as machine. Professor started with an introduction to translation and talked about the expectations while translating and the qualifications a translator should need, and mainly the issues found lexically, extra-linguistic, and humanistic issues too. Sir, it is always an honor for us in having you here in our department, physically or virtually. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. And I thank you on behalf of all of us here today. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Have a nice time. My best wishes.
And I also thank all our senior professors, Nadana Sabhabiji sir, Shanmugam sir, Devasundaram sir, Muralidharan sir, Ravi Shankar sir, Kumar Raj sir, and all the other professors from other institutions all over the country, and the scholars and students for being with us today. Thank you very much, sir. See you all tomorrow. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vijayan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.